But now it's time to introduce our panelists. We have 5 chairs, and I'm about to fill them with some great people for you here. So, first off, I'd like to introduce Eva Havaris, the Vice President of League Operations at CPL and the Vice President of Strategy at Canadian Soccer Business. Eva has previously served as the CEO of Equine Canada and Taekwondo Canada, and she's also got coaching experience at the University of Toronto, Fanshawe, and Western. And you're a local girl here, right? You grew up in London, so Western Mustangs is your team too. I just have a quick question for you, Eva. CPL is kicking off April 27th. Lots of different home openers coming up soon. What's a match that you are most looking forward to as the CPL kicks off?
I didn't realize we were going to talk already.
Oh no, let's go.
Okay, so say that again.
What match are you most... It's good, eh? It's good.
Hi, London.
Yeah. What match are you most looking forward to for the CPL?
I would encourage everybody, if you can get out to it, actually the home opener in Halifax is going to be incredible. So it's a city that, this is their first pro sports team. They're building right at the Wanderers ground, which is an iconic place in Halifax. So brand new stadium, pop-up stadium. They're using shipping containers as their sort of VIP premium seating, so very community-oriented, community feel. Volkswagen, as one of our main founding partners, took the jersey in Halifax, so you'll see 5,000 plus people in the stands. They're giving away a free jersey to everybody in the first game. Wow. It's going to be incredible. So awesome. It's a little bit far, but it's worth it. If you've never been to Halifax, it's a great time.
Now's the time to go. Thank you very much. Yep. Next up, I'd like to introduce Alison Meyer Graves, the CEO of CAUSE, and this is my favorite acronym. It stands for the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport and Physical Activity. Alison works with leaders from media, from business, from sport, and she works together with them to create an equitable, not necessarily equal, and inclusive sport environment for our girls. She's a proud Albertan and is now living in Toronto, and is a former volleyball player, so I'm going to give you a question right away. We're starting right off the bat here. You've been sort of welcomed into the Ontario soccer family, have a lot of soccer friends now, but what would you say is better in the world of soccer than in the world of volleyball?
Oh.
You know your audience, though, so this should be easy.
I think what soccer really has going for it is the size of the community, and it's just so large and so dynamic, and you have so much impact on communities in this province and across Canada, and the potential with that platform is enormous. I still love volleyball best, yes. But this is good too.
We'll let you have that. Everybody, please welcome Alison. I'd like to now introduce Sonia Denoncourt. Sonia, come on out here. Everybody, this is Sonia. Sonia is a native of Sherbrooke, Quebec, and she's begun refereeing at the age of 14, and she worked her way up to become the first ever female FIFA accredited referee. And she's officiated over 100 professional games and international matches, including men's professional games in Brazil, in Salvador, in North America, all over the places. And she's a Canada Soccer Hall of Famer. And now you see that tan, it's because she's a snowbirder in Florida, so lucky her. Question for you, Sonia. You've done so many matches, both men and women. Who has been the most challenging player you've ever had to manage on the field?
Ooh, I hope he's not in the room right now. I would say when I was refereeing here, the men's professional in North America, probably John Limniatis was one of the most challenging guy on the field. You know him, right? Wow, a Greek guy coming in Canada, seeing a woman referee, he's never seen this in his life. I was an alien, and it was challenging for him. Internationally, I think, when you face Ronaldo, you study his game before, so you know he's going to dive, he's going to simulate something, so you're right on his back, and you know how to deal with him. It's often a conversation in the game, but I think he learned fast that it's a one-way conversation.
Thank you for that. Next up, I'd like to introduce Amanda Vandervoort. Everybody, please welcome Amanda. Amanda joins us originally from Arizona. She's now in New York, and she's the VP of Fan Engagement at Major League Soccer. So she works with league and club executives to make sure the fans in our seats have a great time. She is also a goalkeeper in her NCAA Division I playing career, playing at the University of Wyoming, I believe. And she's also been the head coach for the women's program at NYU. So again, a lot of people wearing different hats here. You're born and raised American, but I gotta ask you, who's your favorite Canadian player? You're allowed to give an answer. The Americans aren't watching. I believe so. Yeah. Keep going. Maybe.
This one? Now I'm going to confuse you guys, right? Is there an on switch?
Grab Sonia's for a second there.
Hello?
Yes.
All right. Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. My favorite Canadian player. In addition to my work at Major League Soccer, I've been lucky to work in some advisory capacities with different nonprofits around the world, and one that I'm currently involved in. One of our ambassadors is Karina LeBlanc, and something that as I've gotten to know Karina as an ambassador for our program. We were listening earlier to the 11 principles, and everything up there just reminded me so much of her, how she embraces her role on the team. She's got the will to win, and she's always learning, and that she's inspired me tremendously. So, Karina LeBlanc.
Great answer. And her love for Celine Dion, right? Amanda, I was setting you up for success because I'm now going to call on a former national team player from the women's team, but that's okay. Next up, I'd like to introduce to you Carmelita Moscato. Everybody, please welcome Carmelita. Carm is, as you know, the technical director at Kleinburg Nobleton Soccer Club, but she's also, as we know, has a storied international footballing career. She's a bronze medalist representing Canada. She's got 94 caps for our country and now has had countless coaching experiences all over the world for our youth teams, our regional teams. I'd love to know this. I'm sure you have many answers, but who have you loved playing alongside with when you represent Canada over the past years?
Hi, everybody. This is Teamwork.
Teamwork. There you go. Women supporting women.
So I'm going to forgive Amanda for not saying me, first of all. I tried to get her to do that, but I tried, but that's okay. I'm not going to take too much offense. Karina is a pretty good person to be second best to. In terms of who I love playing with, I think you maybe honor and respect the people who are a little bit different than you. So I'm part of the 71% social category of why I kept playing soccer till 32. I love the game and love my teammates, but I really respect winners and people that know how to win. And I was 31 or 30 something when Jessie Fleming came on the team, and half my age, and taught me a lot about winning. So she was my favorite teammate, and it wasn't for very long, but she is a tremendous person and will change the sport in this country.
And a London area girl as well. So everyone, these are our 5 panelists today, and as you can tell, you don't often get 5 people together on stage like this who have had such different experience and so much experience to their name. I want to preface this conversation by just saying we are here to talk about keeping girls in sport, the module itself, and obviously that topic, but this is a conversation starter for Ontario Soccer, for all of us in the room here. It's about the match officials, it's about the coaches, it's about the business leaders, and it's not only about keeping them there, but it's about recruiting them, keeping them there, and then advancing them as well, because we all know that that has such an impact on our little girls in so many ways. And so I'm going to switch the seat, and we're just about to get started with some questions, so you guys get ready.
They all switched down here.
Scott's been doing a great job. We're good? Excellent. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to start with Alison, and the reason being is Alison is going to set the scene for us. She's working at Cause, and she knows so much about the research about what's plaguing basically this dropout rate that our girls are facing. So, Alison, if you don't mind, tell a story for us and about why we have to have this discussion.
Oh, gosh. Okay, this is something I feel very passionately about, as I suppose you would hope for the person who's really part of leading this conversation nationally. We really come from a strong belief in the power of sport. I think everybody in this room shares that. We believe in what sport can do for people, for communities, And for us, it's specifically what sport can do for women and how it can advance women in society. But in order for us to get there, women have to be in sport. They have to be participating in sport. They have to be leading in sport. They have to be benefiting from what it has to offer. But it's not just about women. This is not a women's issue. This is a sport issue, and more broadly, this is a societal issue, and everyone benefits when people are included, when women are included. So what's the issue? The issue is that no matter what part of sport you look at, there's a gender gap. And so girls participate at lower rates than boys, and they drop out at greater rates when they reach adolescence, which is right before the time when they can most benefit from sport and before they're able to get those lifelong benefits of physical activity and leadership development and everything that we know that sport can offer them. On the leadership scene, women are really underrepresented. Only about 25% of the coaches in Canada are female, and that number dwindles rapidly as you go up in levels of competition. Women's perspectives are not fully represented on boards. At the national level, we're hovering around about 30%. We don't have great data on what it looks like elsewhere, but I think it's safe to assume that it's not better at the grassroots level. And then on it goes. I could rattle off stats forever, but maybe I'll leave it there. But so we've got a ways to go. I think Canada is a world leader when it comes to women in sport. We actually have a lot to be proud of. And there have been huge gains, thanks to a lot of very hard work by a lot of people, women and men, working together on this. But we cannot afford to be complacent. And sport will be so much better for it when we see that we've got that gender balance in place.
That's right. And I think talking about the dropout is one of the main things we want to chat about today. So on the panel and looking across here, I think we have experience of people dropping out at various ages. So I'm going to actually pivot to Carm here. You've had almost like a cookie cutter sort of career, you said. You started playing house league at 4 at Dixie. You played in Ontario all the way up to the provincial team, eventually to the national team. But then you told me that you quit at 19. So can you tell us a little bit about what caused you to quit and what were some of the factors that led into that?
Yeah, so sometimes my story doesn't seem as, inspiring in the sense that I kind of did go through the ranks in the pathway that was available at the time, the OYSL and everything else. So that part was not as inspiring, I think. I think I just kind of was one of those players that worked super hard, got cut a few times, learned a few lessons, and kept going. You hear that from every athlete you'll ever speak to. But at 19, I was part of the national team program, and as we all know, that's a train to win, right? That's a performance-based environment, and young in my eyes, and what I felt was an up-and-coming midfielder, and just told point blank, Carm, really, you're not good enough, and you aren't going to amount to anything in this international game. And call it 19, call it whenever that moment happens for that little kid, and that person, they receive those messages, and I think that can happen at 4, that can happen at 9, that can happen at 12, and can lead to dropout. Right, so the impact of the coach in this moment, that was what allowed me to, I really believed him, I thought to myself, like, he's the coach, like he knows what the level is, and I guess he's right. So that led, for me, I believed him, and 5 years later, I quit the game, and I took other jobs in the sport because I still was in love with the sport, and I think that was the success story there. And I tried again at 25, but arguably lost quite a few years of substantial growth, and you always look back, and I don't look back with regret, but what could have happened if that moment didn't happen? It shaped me into who I was. I don't regret a thing in my life, but I think we got to be careful with our words and how we encourage girls, how we speak to them, because nobody has a crystal ball. And a lot of the success stories in both male and female sport, there were no real indicators. Nobody has that science. Nobody knows that 13-year-old's going to go on to be world class. They may be a late developer. They may be whatever. So just be careful with how we speak to our players in our club, male and female, but females are a little bit sensitive, as we know. So
And that's something that the Keeping Girls in Sport module actually speaks to quite a bit. So we don't want to give away all of the sort of the nuggets of information you get from there, but that's something that is a central theme that girls need to have a certain way to be spoken to. It's about social acceptance, it's about fun, and we can't lose sight of that even at the high performance level. And so Eva, I know you played high performance both at the varsity level and university, and you told me that you had quit as well. Can you talk a little bit about what were some of the factors that caused you to drop out for a few years?
Sure. Most people actually don't know that I stepped away from soccer for a couple years, and I don't usually share it, but for my close friends and family, and now you guys, this new family, I will share what caused that. So I decided to go down to the States to play Division I soccer. Started in Detroit. Fantastic program, fantastic coach, great experience for me. Very scary city. So I found the experience outside of our season to be not what I was looking for. A lot of time in dorm rooms, a lot of alcohol around, quite frankly, to create an experience, and it just wasn't not what I was looking for. Ended up transferring down to Tennessee, Chattanooga, Tennessee. And part of the reason I did it was a couple of my teammates from London were down there, and I had a coach. There was a coach there that had been recruiting me even out of high school to go down. And I was quite excited to go because she was a female coach. So I went down there, and for those of you that know me, I'm quite a strong personality, and I really don't do well being put in a box. So I went down there. I knew I was going to be part of building a program. It was a new Division I program, so in the new programs, the early days, it's very challenging. The team is young. The scores get quite high, and you have to work through that. And what I found was my teammates, as had been for many years of my life, just gravitated towards me and my leadership, and certainly in very tough times that we had on the field. And what I found in that experience was being confronted on my own leadership and my own strength around my teammates by someone that I was hoping to be a mentor and to inspire me to be part of the game in the future. So we definitely clashed, and I paused, and it made me realize that I was 12 hours away from my family and my friends and everything I loved, and I thought, you know, I'm making this sacrifice for essentially this person in this program that was almost meaningless to me. And that was very hard for me to realize because this sport had been part of my life since I was 4 years old, and very intensely. So I made the decision to come home. I had to sit out. I went to Western. I had to sit out 1 year. I remember waking up the morning that I could actually play, and I was back in my community. So many people expected me to go to Western and to be there. I woke up that morning, and I had done nothing all summer to prepare for it. I felt I didn't deserve to show up and to be part of the team. And so I actually set my alarm for when I was supposed to be at camp, and I just decided not to go. And of course, my phone was ringing off the hook. Everyone was wondering where the hell I was, and I decided to join a band instead. So I taught myself drums, and I focused on another passion of mine and another part of my identity. And so that, for me, was a big part of how I moved forward in sport, because in this community, I'm known as Eva, the soccer person, and being back in soccer now, even more so. But there's also so many other parts of me that moment of time being away from the sport actually allowed me to explore all these other things that I loved as well that I just never really had time for playing soccer. Mm-hmm. So I eventually did get back to the sport, but it was interesting for me to know that it was actually a female that had turned me off for a while.
Right, and so that's sort of the subject of mentorship, which is extremely important for our females in the game, whether they're players, whether they're coaches or administrators. And so I want to touch on mentorship a little bit later on, because I think that's something that we in this room can certainly do, because we can mentor our young girls and we can help them keep them in the game by giving them that guidance. But while we're still sort of on the topic of, taking a break from the game, dropping out for whatever reasons, we have definitely some coaches on the panel here. So Amanda, you were a coach and maybe still, but definitely in previous years. Can you tell from a coaching perspective how you saw that challenge? If you ever saw your girls dropping off, or if you ever saw girls within your community dropping off, and what were some of the causes there, and how you would address them maybe today?
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear all the panelists and everyone's different entry point into the sport or exit point into the sport. I actually didn't start playing until I was 13. So I was, here we are talking about the point when so many girls leave the game. That's when I came in. And for me at the time, it was a social exercise. All my friends were playing, so I joined in. And then I got really competitive. I think I'm probably on the 80% competitive side, for those who were in the earlier session. And I kind of excelled as an athlete through college, and then after college, I went into coaching. So I guess that's kind of the path to share of my journey and my experience. And as a coach, I coached boys, I coached girls, I coached men, I coached women, but I had a coaching career until I was about 27, 28, when I left the profession and came to the business side of the game, which I can share more about that as well, that transition. But as a coach, certainly throughout my career, I've had many players either start maybe later or earlier and then leave the game. And certainly, for me, my favorite age to coach is that 12 to 14 age, when they're just starting to really get a hold of tactics in a meaningful way. And players have left the game for all different reasons, whether it was, like your case, a mentor, maybe they wanted to explore other areas of their life and of their, of what they want to achieve in the future. But what I think is really interesting is when they are in the game, can we find those opportunities to help develop them, help mentor them, help guide them towards staying in the game, so that when they do make the choice, it's of their own volition that they want to explore something new or something different, and find ways to identify those strengths and help our players lean into strengths that they have, so that they can find purpose and value when they are participating in the game.
It's really interesting that you mentioned too that you entered because it was a social reason, and again, that's such a big takeaway for our girls too. Totally agree with what you said too, but it's about remembering that we have to keep it social for our girls, and it's about having it fun, and that can be at the high performance level, but that should definitely also be the case for the grassroots level. So that's something that's really important to reiterate. Sonia, as the match official, you've coached as well, but your expertise on this panel here is from the match officials, and like I said, you've had such a great experience or a career thus far. Did you ever notice coaching sort of behaviors when it was a women's game or a girls' game that had maybe negative impact or positive impact? What did you see as a referee that you would maybe want to share with the group was good coaching behavior?
I'll be careful. Nancy, where are you? I need you. Yes, it is difficult. When I started to referee, I was 14-year-old, and then there was no women, and there was not much of like women's football anyway. And so therefore, I was playing with the boys. I was like refereeing boys' games, and then I went up, and then even like up to like 20 years ago, we didn't have much women's football at the international level. It just started. 1996 was the first Olympic with women's football, so it's not far behind us. So yes, I was a little crazy before. I was a little alien before in the eyes of everybody. I'm still a little crazy, I think, but it's okay. You got to be crazy to be a referee. But I hope I'm going to convince all of you that with all those beautiful jobs in football, refereeing is the best. I guarantee you, it's the best. It's the most challenging one, but it's the best. It's the best job. And then, so you have to work a lot psychologically when you, in the middle of the field, and this is where I was the most comfortable, when I was wearing shorts and shoes, and I have the whistle in my hands, and that little rectangular, this is my comfort zone. It's when I was off the field that it was a little bit more difficult. And when you face those big guys, I'm about 6 foot tall, so it's okay. I was able to face those big guys. But you develop different tricks to face the challenge. You talk to them differently. Nancy said it earlier. You talk to the men's coach or the players differently than you talk to the women. There is a lot of simulation in our game, and there's a lot of abuse and dissent, unfortunately. And it was more in the men's game, so there was more management to do in a men's game, a lot more. And especially when they've never seen a woman referee, it was more difficult. And then how many times I've heard that I should go back to my kitchen, I don't know. It's incredible. Go back to your kitchen. Why a woman is referee on the men's game, and then what are you doing here, and all this. So I developed like really strong skin and character, and I developed tricks and answers that like, whoop, you know, like stop them from like talking to me like this. And on the women's side, they were like so respectful. They were like, free kick, yes, and then they were like taking 10 yards, and it was like, that was 10 years ago, and she was not playing yet. But now it's a different game. You watch women's football now, like the World Cup, Women's World Cup coming up around the corner, it's completely different. If you ref Brazil on the women's side, or even the American, I'd be one back, had something to say every match, you know? And so now it's a different game, so you have to like talk to them. But again, it's a different challenge. And if you put a men referee in a women's game, he's going to be lost a little bit if it's his first game. And the other way around as well. So you have to build up your expertise in each of the field and each of the level, and then have a pattern, you know, like to go up and learn.
That's great. Alison, I'm going to ask you in a little bit about representation, because I think that's what we're talking about there, with especially the match officials. So before we get to that, though, for the players on the panel, what was it like seeing female officials on the field? Did that change your experience as a player? Did that change your experience as a coach? Is it a positive to have? I mean, of course, it's a positive for girls to see a woman in that role, but can you maybe speak to the positive benefits of having enough female referees in the game?
I think I'm of this belief in every component of every profession or every career in soccer. We always just look for competency. I have to admit, like as much as we love to see role models, and I think it's an important discussion for this room. I'm not against that in any way, shape, or form, obviously. But if a ref made a bad call, they made a bad call. If they made a good call, they made a good call. It's just kind of what it was. And you know, sitting here in my platform now as a technical director, I don't want to be looked at as anything but the work I'm doing at my club. There's a competency here that I really, really want to focus on. And yes, the genders and male, female, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, but it's the person. And I think Nancy Spotton did a good job at identifying that. It's not really gender specific. So for me, it was always competency. It was great to see another fellow sisterhood. You know, John talked about brotherhoods and sisterhoods. Seeing a female on a big stage, or even on a little stage, it was always like, good on you. Let's get to the game. That's just how I felt from a player perspective anyway. But now from a TD perspective, of course we're going to be promoting and trying to get more females involved.
We'll definitely touch on that, but Eva, do you have something to add to that?
I just completely agree with Carm. I mean, I just had a flash of being at Nationals, and that was a platform where Canada Soccer would use that space to give female referees the opportunity to gain that experience at that level. At the end of the day, we've worked so hard to get to that point. We just want a great referee, and we want the right call, and we want the best team to win. And it did not matter. Obviously now, you know, you go 10 years on or 15 years on from that, and you know the importance of creating that opportunity, but as an athlete, you just want the best that you can get, and you would expect that for any athlete or any team.
For sure. So Alison, if we take those 2 points into consideration, I think there's also the issue of capacity building. Totally agree. It's about competency. It's for the game to go on as best as it can. We need to have a competent and capable referee or match official in the middle. But there's a gap, and we'll get to that with Sonia. There's only about a quarter, 25% of referees are women. So it's also about capacity building and building the pipeline to have more competent female and successful female referees, coaches, players. So maybe you can speak to building that capacity with that sort of representation lens as well.
Sure. I would say that when you look at this systemically, so across the whole system, what happens in one club or another club or one sport versus another sport can look very different. But systemically, we know that women are still facing a lot of barriers in getting into these roles. Individual pathways vary, et cetera, but on the whole, when you see the stats, you see that you know, we're, as 50% of the population, what we do is still groundbreaking at times, when for men it's like an everyday thing, because they've had access and opportunities for decades that women have not had. And so yeah, you're a groundbreaker, right? Isn't that amazing that like it's so exceptional for a woman to do what you've done? So how do we change that? And I think it really comes from a position of equity, is really considering that given these historical imbalances, it's not just a matter of extending opportunity, because not everybody is equally able to access that opportunity. And so how do we take steps that acknowledge that people are coming from different places and they may need different things in order to get them to that finish line? So I absolutely agree that, you know, we need these opportunities. It starts with having the opportunity, but the way to make that successful, the way to ensure that the woman that gets that access is successful is to support her in being there through mentorship, through training opportunities, through networking, through capacity building, whatever that might be. And I absolutely come from the perspective that the onus is on the organizations, the onus is on the institutions. Women are not fundamentally worse at coaching, officiating, leading, playing. We have just created this system that has created these dynamics where you know, women just haven't had the same opportunities to be in those places, to develop those skills, to have the confidence to do that sort of thing. So I really think that the onus is on the leadership to start to tear some of those barriers down, to invite women in and to support them in being there.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. So Amanda, I want to get to you in terms of the transition to business leadership. You were a leader on the field because, again, I mentioned representation quite a bit, but you know, we had earlier Melanie Bradley from Brams United. We had Guelph Soccer, shout out their female GM. It's important for our system in Ontario, across the country really, to have women in leadership positions because they help make those equitable decisions. And so Carm was talking about now she's the technical director. You're in the position now to develop female match officials, to develop your coaches, to keep your girls in sport. But Amanda, maybe you can speak to how do you take, you know, our athletes, our girls, and how can we transition them into leadership in the offices, in the boardroom as well?
I will start by sharing a little bit about my story.
Please.
And that I was coaching at NYU in New York, and I decided that I was ready to leave New York, and I wanted to explore my passions in technology. So I left my job, got on a plane, and moved to San Francisco, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I knew I wanted to be in the Silicon Valley. I ended up working for a gentleman there who had this great idea to create an online resource for downloadable practice plans. And I thought, oh yeah, sure, I have plenty of coaching friends, we can collect all these practice plans, it'd be great. And during that experience, I learned about online marketing, I learned about how to build a website, how to build a business, really. I mean, everything from identifying an office location to getting internet hooked up. So it was really this you know, on-the-ground experience of starting a business, but I learned all these technical tools through pulling my soccer experience through into that. And at the same time, that was right before women's professional soccer, the second iteration of the Women's Pro League in the United States launched, and I heard rumors that it was starting, so I started blogging. I started just writing about what I thought the future of women's professional soccer could be in North America. I don't know, I've taken the blogs offline because I looked back at them and I thought, wow, we didn't go that direction, but probably a good thing. But it was still this exploration of what women's professional soccer could look like. And it caught the attention of some decision makers who then hired me into the organization to help build and grow the digital presence of women's professional soccer. So my path and my journey was still, soccer has always been a thread, but I've moved from coaching into the business side because I learned, I always be learning, always be asking questions and trying to learn. And I find that people, women or men who are making the transition from the on the field to off the field, the more you can learn and put yourself in that next step by either blogging or making videos. We were talking earlier, there was somebody back here in the audience that was creating videos that you guys were posting online to the 7,500 views, right? Well, that's the next step for him, right? So start to build those skills and start to acquire some of the connections and the networking. You know, we often say it's who you know, not what you know, too. So the networking for me became a big part of it. Being here at this summit, I think, is an incredibly powerful opportunity to meet people and ask questions about what opportunities are in sport beyond maybe what you're doing today. And that's where I started mine, was at the United Soccer Coaches. It used to be called the NSCAA, United Soccer Coaches in the United States. I was the 5th female president of that organization in 75 years. During that time, thank you, during that time, we restructured our board of directors and went from 19 people to 10. Might sound familiar. I know Ontario Soccer has recently been through something similar. But after being the 5th female president in that organization in 75 years, there's now 3 directly in line after me because of the governance. The way that we restructured the governance allowed the opportunity for more women to be both mentored into leadership and then assume leadership roles within the organization. So there's 2 things that I just described. One, my own personal journey and how to kind of lead into that next step. Right? But also, too, the systems, the organizations, the structures, to your point, have to then create that pathway that people can step into.
That's really great. So I hear you almost speaking to Nancy's keynote, because it's about that learning mindset. So you had that learning mindset, you were able to extend yourself and build that into a business career, essentially. And then with your statement about it's not about what you know, sometimes it's who you know. It's about having advocates, basically. So did you have champions and advocates that helped you get there? And maybe you can speak to an anecdote about on how that helped you in your career?
I had a coach once. Well, there's 2 people that I'll speak to. One, I had the head coach of, I worked in the Olympic Development Program, which is a youth identification program for U.S. soccer, and I worked in Region 1, and I had a coach who, her name is Sue Ryan. She was the coach at Stony Brook University, and she was doing an evaluation session of me one time, and I thought I had to express everything that I knew to these players because she was evaluating me, so I had to explain that I knew first defender and second defender and third defender and overlapping runs. These poor kids, they were 12, right? Yeah, the full thing. And she said, okay, Amanda, here's what I want you to think about. She's like, in this session, she's like, you've got a target. She's like, and yeah, you want to accomplish all those things in the target, but what I want you to do is just pinpoint right in the middle. I want you to get in, hit the middle of the target, and then get out. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. That's super applicable to like everything, right? I don't need to show everyone everything I know or get everything out of Sonia's brain today. But if I can take that one kernel and nugget and walk away with it, I've found that really valuable in my life. The second mentor that I had, her name was Charlotte Moran, and she was the administrator of Region 1. And in Pennsylvania. And she passed away about 6-7 years ago from pancreatic cancer. But what she pulled me aside when I was 24, and she pulled me aside, and she said, Amanda, there's something in you. She said, I'm going to tell you this, change happens in the boardroom. I want you to get into the boardroom. And then she put me into a women's committee, where then I ran newsletters and did videos, and I mean, I busted my tail for that committee at the time. But committee work, I think, is so important to both understand, grow your experience, meet new people, but also there are different paths to leadership that you can find through getting involved through committee work. And so that stays with me today when I'm in the boardroom at Major League Soccer. I know that I have the ability to create policy, impact policy, and ultimately create change as a result of that. But it wouldn't have happened with Charlotte Moran when I was 24, telling me just that little simple thing.
Exactly. On the topic of board leadership, I'm going to go to Alison and maybe Eva too, because of your role with the nominations committee with Ontario Soccer. So you've helped us essentially build our new board, essentially. But maybe Alison, board sort of representation is such an important topic for Cause. Maybe you can speak to what Amanda just mentioned and mention why it's so important across the sector and especially soccer.
I have great love for this topic, and that's such a fantastic story. We did a survey of PSOs in Ontario for one of our projects. We're collaborating with Ontario Soccer on this project. And we asked them, what are your priorities as an organization? And what are your priorities for women and girls in your sport? And it was athletes, coaches, athletes, coaches, athletes, coaches, just right across the board. Board at the bottom. And I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that. Sometimes the board is in your way. Sometimes they feel really removed from what your core business is. But we were sorry to see that, because we feel like what happens around that board table is so critical to where we're all trying to get as a system, as a values-based system. And in particular, for those advocating for women and women's voices and perspectives, having women in those decision-making roles who are helping to inform the future of an organization, the future of a sport, strategy, budget, hiring and firing of the executive director, and on policy, and on it goes. If we're missing perspectives of the people that we're ultimately trying to serve, we're probably not going to serve them as well as we could and we should. Women deserve the opportunity to be in that space, but also our organizations need them there if we're going to perform to the highest levels that we can. We need that diversity of perspective, multiple viewpoints. We need to represent our target audience. We're not going to get more girls in sport and keep more girls in sport unless women are part of that conversation.
Do you have anything to add to that? Or maybe I'll even ask Sonia about what her experience was at FIFA, but I'll open up the panel for any comments there.
In a nutshell, what was your experience?
Where do we start? Well, if you look at FIFA, I'm going to talk specifically refereeing because, we have an expert panel here to talk about everything else. But in 1994, we were just like 4 women referee in the international list. And it was the first time in the men's list. There was only 1 list. In 1995, second Women's World Cup in Sweden, they created a women's list and a men's list. We were 20 in the world. But there was only 6 of us at the World Cup, and everybody else were men referees. And then boom, 1999 in the US Women's World Cup, all of a sudden 32 referees and all women. So it progressed, nicely. And now there's a little less than 1,000 referee at the international level. So in only 25 years maybe, we've come a long way in that way. But refereeing, despite it's the best job in the world, it is difficult. It is difficult. And then we have a big problem of recruiting referees and retaining referees. And then just to have a few stats interesting, within 2 years, we lose 80% of our referees. So Ontario Soccer and under Nikki's leadership, they're doing a fantastic job by mentoring the referees, trying to help them to keep in the game, stay in the game. But bottom line, after being abused and being yelled at for 2 years, who wants that? I'm going to work at McDonald's, make the same money, and then go home and then move on in my life, right? How fun is that? So I think we all have a responsibility to keep girls in sport. And then I always say that I don't want to be the bad guy to ruin somebody's life because I yell at that kid and now he's quit the game. We need everybody. Imagine you as parents, it's your daughter refereeing and she's being abused on the field, even worse physically. Imagine if it's your son and now he's losing all his self-esteem and he can't move on and he's destroyed because of one person. You don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. Right? So it is difficult. And this is dangerous for me to say this, but soccer is a wonderful sport, football, but it is a bit corrupted. It is a bit corrupted, right? Look at FIFA, fantastic. At CONCACAF, our confederation, and CONMEBOL, and everybody has their problem, but it starts in the boardroom, and you said that. And FIFA has changed a little bit their executive committee, but we're still have so much work to do. We're a long, long way for equality and equity in women in sport, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So pivot back to Eva here. I mean, it's about board leadership, but it's also about C-level. We like to say, CEO level sort of leadership as well. You yourself having been at the helm of 2 NSOs, Taekwondo and Equine Canada, and now having one of the most influential roles at the CPL. How important, how was your journey getting there, I should say, and what were some of the factors that got you there, whether it be mentorship or representation, whatever it may be?
So I started my career with Rugby Canada out of grad school. One thing I always knew is I was going to work in the sports system one way or another. And even when I tried to sort of leave and pursue law and maybe be a judge one day, I couldn't imagine my life without sport. So it was at rugby, and rugby is it's amazing now. I mean, we're not talking now, let's talk 15 years ago when I first started. It's a very male culture. Many of the resources were going into the men's program, which was ranked, I think, 20th in the world at the time. Then you had the women's program where it was just sort of coming up, but 4th in the world. And then you've got me, who never played that sport, didn't know anyone in that sport, and ended up getting a position of being responsible to manage the development of the sport across coaching, athlete development, the women's game, etc. So a lot of people in the community, when I first started, said, how the hell did she get this job? And being the outsider in that sport was probably the biggest blessing I had, because for me, I came at it from my own experience, not just as a female, but as an athlete coming through a system, as a coach as well, and really focusing on bringing to life the true potential of every athlete, every coach, every administrator, and then the organization as a whole. So I got drawn into this systemic stuff pretty early on in my career. And it was through that, I mean, I just made sure, one, I knew myself really well. So even being an outsider, I absolutely stepped into that role and embraced the responsibility I was given to help that sport grow and go to another level. And I'll never forget the day that I was asked to present at one of our annual general meetings. I looked out in the audience. It was probably, no offense, 40 white men. Certainly looking at me saying, well, you've never played the sport, you don't know what you're talking about. So I just took the opportunity to step up to the podium in that moment and say, don't invest in the women's game because it's, you know, the right thing to do or because it's for equity. Do it because your women are ranked number 4 in the world. You can very easily, if this country embraces their potential and embraces their ability, this team and this program can be number 1 in the world, which would actually put Canadian rugby on the map globally and then help the men's program succeed. And I think it was the best person to give that message, because it was a female saying, do it for those right reasons, not because, you know, it's a, you know, we have to match funding and things like that. There was real potential there that was totally being overlooked because of the blinders. Out of that experience, there was an individual, Dave Hill, out of BC, who had been working as a consultant with Taekwondo. At the time, they needed a CEO. My experience in rugby made it very clear for me that 5 years out, I was going to lead an NSO, so my next job was not going to be sort of scaling up that way. It was, I'm leading, I don't know where it's gonna be, but I need to be in that role. And so he had approached me saying, you know, Taekwondo is looking for a CEO, would you be interested? And I thought, Taekwondo? If I knew nothing about rugby as a team sport, I definitely knew nothing about the martial arts and Korean culture and that whole sport. I ended up getting the job. I sold myself on the fact that I could handle a lot of files, which they needed. And so I took that sport on for 4 years, and to Sonia's point of corruption in sport, unfortunately, the truth is that there is a lot of corruption in sport, including in our system. And again, it comes back to knowing what you stand for, knowing what your values are, and I will never, in my leadership role or any role I'm giving, I will never sacrifice integrity, accountability, to turn a blind eye to someone's position of power and someone's desire to hold on to that power for their own sake. So when I see a community suffering, an organization suffering, an athlete not getting the opportunity they should have because someone wants to maintain power and control, I just step into that and call that out. So the most important thing that I could have done in the 8 years of leading NSOs was working with the boards. It's a challenging place to work with, especially as a CEO. You're almost in a no-win situation because you have to confront the individuals that end up ultimately having the decision-making power to either hire or fire you at a whim. And if you challenge too much or too closely onto their integrity, you could be outnumbered, or you can surround yourself with the people that actually believe exactly what you believe in and are there for the right reasons. And that role is so important. So my involvement with Ontario Soccer and their nomination committee was for me, the best way I could give back to the sport of soccer that gave me so much as an athlete growing up, and especially in this province, was to help Johnny and help that board to really vet with my committee members for people that really wanted to come onto that board, that had integrity. They were not coming for power. They were absolutely coming to push the sport forward to be able to, push the limits themselves, show up as authentically who they were, not looking to jockey for the president role and see who they could take out. This was about getting the people on that board that are totally committed as a team to moving the sport forward for the province. And so I'm very excited to hear that so far so good, and also very excited to continue to help in that regard. I feel it's the best place I can help right now.
Thank you for that, Eva. Really. Just taking a moment really quickly, we've talked to these women for several minutes now. You can tell that they are just incredible at what they do. They are extremely competent. They are leaders because they've earned their way there. And so sometimes we've talked about, it's not about putting a woman in a certain position, whether it's the CEO, whether it's the board, or whether it's, the technical director, for the sake of it. And I've mentioned representation a couple times. Yes, it's important. But I think, Carm, you and I talked about, like, you did your coaching licenses, like you've done your schooling, everybody's done their training to get to where they are. So maybe you can speak to what's problematic about just throwing women into those positions because we feel like it's the right thing to do, or it's what should be done.
Yes, I feel like the intentions have always been really good. Let's make these, like we said earlier, the opportunity should be there, and then how we kind of champion that effort and how we get people in those positions are all going to be different because we're meeting people at very different points and different challenges. So the opportunities being there is the first and foremost most important thing. But what I have found and what I have observed, and it's happened in the NCAA level. I've coached at a few universities in my 20s in the NCAA as well, and I just saw people getting positions to fill, like to tick a box in a way, right? And I think the intention is super good from the board and all the powers that be. We're saying, you know what, let's do this. Let's put that female there. And I've seen females fail miserably, get fired halfway through the season. And they probably will never return back to the sport because of that. So there's got to be a better way. It's kind of this chicken and the egg argument. Like, okay, the opportunities are there, but maybe a lot more strategic investment in how we actually promote these females. And I know it's happening at all levels and all over the country. And if we need a female person or our staff member, tech staff member on the bench. And then I'll tell you a little quick story. So I went to Australia for 10 months to see it after I worked for Canada Soccer. Things changed, and I moved to Australia for 10 months, and I took on 2 women's teams. And I was the head coach of the first grade and the reserve grade team. And I had a part-time assistant male coach who was a lot younger than me, a decade younger than me. So every single match official went to shake his hand and say, "How you doing, coach? Where's your whatever game sheet?" And I would laugh. I didn't take it personally. I was just like looking at it. He was like, "She's the coach." He was so uncomfortable with that moment as well. It was just so awkward, and it took 20 games out of 24 for the match officials to start addressing me as the head coach. I just sat there. I don't take it personally. I'm just kind of go with the flow kind of gal. But I'm thinking to myself, geez, what is going on with this world that's actually the assumption, right? So I kind of trailed off there, but I guess to circle back, more investment in competency. That's where I'm coming from right now, and if I say this is the last thing I say on the panel, I would say that. Go get your licenses. There's integrity in that. There's an art to it. Yes, the professional development happens every day. Every time you run a session, yesterday I ran a session, I would have changed like 4 things. Great, keep learning. And you move forward, and that's all it has to be. We don't have to make it this big production, but let's put a little bit more effort into that growth process for our females and not just ticking boxes.
Thank you, Carm. Amanda, going back to you a little bit, I know you were enthralled with what John Herdman had said before, or at his keynote, I should say, and sort of this topic of male advocacy came up too. And if you look at this room, we should be really proud that it's not just women in this room, obviously. Gentlemen, you're here, and you're part of this conversation, and I think that's incredibly important because you are also the leaders at your club, and you're also the decision makers who can make the sports system better for our girls. But Amanda, maybe you can speak to what the role of the men and the boys are with this challenge, with this mission, I keep saying, because it's certainly not what Alison said, a women's fight. It's not one for just the girls to handle.
Well, I think you just nailed it on the head there, right?
No. I'd love to hear from you. on that one.
I thought, well, yesterday I thought it was so cool hearing John talk about his experience of going from the women's national team to the men's national team, and cool in the fact that he was so revealing and vulnerable about what that experience was like, and how challenging, and he used the word misogyny when he was on stage yesterday, actually, and what that experience was like for him, for people to judge him or evaluate him because he had worked with a women's team at the highest level, by the way. And it just really struck me to think about our experiences as women in the men's game, or my experience as a woman in the men's professional game, and what that's like on a daily basis, right? And really, and I said this to John after the session, but to have men who are advocating on behalf of the women is absolutely critical and key, because yes, we can raise our voices and stand up for our own advocacy, but really the real power of a man speaking on behalf of a woman in that boardroom, or in any instance, in any environment, in any situation, the power of that is it's empowering to the woman, but to the entire room of people to know that it's okay to step up and stand up for the person next to you, regardless of their gender or ethnicity or background. And that struck me yesterday with John. Really powerful to think about. And to be in this room, that's the first thing I thought when I looked out at this room of the diverse room of people here who want to hear about our experiences in the game and keeping girls and women in the game. And it's been a theme this whole weekend, and I've been really inspired by that.
May I add to the comments?
Please.
The insight that I think it's safe to say John inspires a nation, let alone this room. So having worked in that environment with John for it was 6 years for me, what I felt like the most, and the people will bring up Karina LeBlanc, and we'll talk about her as the CONCACAF head of women's football for 41 MAs. First of all, I wish she was in the room because I'd just give her a round of applause just because. But at the end of the day, that leadership journey for her wasn't, people see her as an eccentric character, and she was always that big, huge personality in net, and she had her kind of athlete personality nailed down, was a social media favorite, the team favorite, fan favorite. She's just one of those people. She's bigger than life. But I remember being in the room and also being a teammate of hers, and just her talking about how John planted the seed for us in 2012 before we went on any journeys, before we even achieved bronze medals and all the things that people are talking about now. That journey started well before that. And he planted seeds that we would not only change soccer in this country, that was our mission, but that we would change the lives of little girls as we were doing that. And every time we pulled on the shirt, and he's doing the exact same thing, if not on a grander scale for the men. But Karina, circling back to her, the reason she believes she can be in that leadership role now is because those seeds were planted, and she didn't even know her capacity. And she will go on to do even bigger things than that, if that's even possible, because of the person that she is. And all of us, if you look at that kind of graduating class, we all believe we can do something bigger in the sport, and we're going to continue to do that. So why is it different in your club? There is no difference.
Thank you, Carm. Alison, we've talked a lot about in the work that we've done with Ontario Soccer that creating buy-in is especially important. And with Amanda, with what she just said, it's about having buy-in from everybody in the room, so men and women. Could you please talk about why buy-in is important and why it's such a challenge for so many organizations to achieve?
Sure. Well, I think you all experience this am I off?
1 second.
You experience this. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I probably just turned it off. You experience this on so many levels. It doesn't matter what agenda, what topic it is that you're trying to advance. Like, there's always the need to get people to join you on that journey, or at the very least, like, get out of the way. And so, it's no different. It's no different than this. But I will say that there's a lot of societal baggage around gender equity. A lot of people come to the table with a lot of beliefs, a lot of assumptions, and a lot of unconscious bias. Mm-hmm. So this is becoming a little bit more of a buzzword, but it's the understanding that, like, we all have biases that are born from our own experience, our upbringing, and they inform how we interact with people.
and what we say yes to and what we say no to and so on. And so we know that there's a lot of unconscious, unintentional bias that pervades our system. So the process of getting that intentional, active buy-in is absolutely crucial to moving this piece forward. And a lot of it starts with conversations like this. Just like, let's just start talking about it. Let's start naming it. Let's start acknowledging it. And then let's think about where we can go from here, and who wants to be part of this journey. And for those who are on the fence or who are just like staunchly opposed to whatever it might be, what do I need to understand about that person and about where they're coming from, so that we can have a really intelligent conversation and I can meet them where they are, and we can start to think about where there's an opportunity to find some common ground so that we can move forward together. So it's, nothing moves forward without that. This is not a one person in an organization job to, it's not the woman's job who's sitting around your table to be like, hey, can you take care of this for us? And just like report back when you're done. It's a whole team effort.
Sure. Did you have anything to add to that?
When we started the conversation talking about the limited amount of women that there are in the boardroom, right? So ultimately, how can the people who are in the boardroom today, women or men, but how can we think about creating a systematic leadership initiative, right, that ultimately grows leaders, grows people, grows their experience, their competencies into leadership roles, whether it's on the field, off the field, in the boardroom, et cetera. But then also, those people, we have to create policies that open the door for women to get in. And a lot of times, to your point, it is male advocates who are at the table and in those chairs who have to take the initiative to create the policies and make the change themselves to open the door for other women to get in.
Completely agree. We've talked about, the player, the match official, the coach, and the board leader, the leader in the office, so to speak. With Eva from the CPL and Amanda, you from the MLS, the fans also have to see it as well. And so obviously we're so excited for CPL to be building in these next few weeks, these next few months. Can you speak to what the vision is for CPL and the women's game and how the league will be supporting the women in that regard?
We're going to be hiring Carm,
Yes.
and Carm's going to tell us what we need to do.
Thank you so much. We'll talk later.
But in all seriousness, we are going to get alumni involved. I think Carm knows this, that we need to get the alumni involved, get them around the table and work with us as to what we need to do for the league. I can say we have a very committed ownership group that will be ready when the time is right to push professional soccer for women in this country. The Canadian Soccer Business, which is sort of our parent company, had purchased League One. League One has 13 or 14 women's teams within that league that we plan to start to build some initiatives around, not only creating better exposure for that league and for the women in that game, but also, how can we create more opportunities? So for those that aren't selected into the national team program, or maybe that's not their pathway, but they're still very talented, what can we do, what opportunities can we create through global partnerships, and with our alumni, sort of saying this is what needs to happen, that we can create those opportunities for women in the game, girls in the game that are coming through, so that they too in this country have something to look forward to, and that the pathway is clear beyond just the national team. And then from a fan point of view, communities need to get out and support the women's game. Sometimes you have the business people that just look at the dollars and cents of it and say, is this a viable venture? So there's many reasons why we need to do it, but as community members, when that does happen and when it comes to be, there has to be no doubt in your mind that it's absolutely needed. And I can say on the corporate side, the partnership side, I'm getting asked all the time, what do we plan to do for the women's game? And in fact, I think they're almost more interested in what we're going to do for the women's game than this men's professional league. So I just kind of have to dance around that for now. However, there's a big interest from corporate Canada as to what we're going to do. So big things to come. Carm, you're hired when you're ready, and we'll go from there.
That's great to hear. Sonia, just to ask you, I mean, when that day comes, you know, that there's a women's professional league in Canada, what would that do for match official development for women in Ontario, in Canada?
Can I get a job too to lead the
Please
referee?
hire
Sonia, we need
everybody.
you too.
Hire everybody.
Yes. I did ask you earlier. You know that. That's why we were sitting.
Yes, yes. Well, this is a dream. This would be a dream. I think the women's game is so beautiful, and in Canada is so passionate about the women's national team. Look at the turnout in every game that we have in Canada. It's so fantastic. So yeah, please push that way, definitely. We need to keep it in a safe environment for the ladies. We need to keep it secure. We need to keep it appropriate. It's got to be fun. It's got to be educative. And then this is how we're going to keep the girls in sport. And I think we're on the right path, but it may take a few years, but I value all the effort and then to work together. We're one team. We're only one team. And if, you know, it's such a small word. If we work against one another, we're not going to go anywhere. Let's forget the power trip. Let's forget the lack of fairness. Let's have some integrity and then just work as one team. And then I think soccer will become really in Canada number one and way far ahead of ice hockey and every other sport.
I'm just looking at my watch, and I think we're getting close to that point where we have to wrap up. But I want to throw one more question out there, and it's, you know, we've talked at the strategy level, that 30,000-foot level. In many cases, you've got people here who are the doers, they're the people on the ground. So this is really an open question. Match officials, coaches, leaders, board members, what would you say to these guys sitting here? What can they start doing on Monday, tomorrow, to sort of address this issue and address this mission, and to keep their girls and women in sport, not just on the field, but as we mentioned, in the offices, in the boardrooms, in the match officiating clinics as well?
I have one very simple kind of request, maybe bring a friend to work day. Because if you looked at the packed stadium for John Herdman's keynote, which is, of course, yeah, it was unbelievable. He's an unbelievable human being. But, like, where's everybody today? We say it's important. It's equally, if not more important, you know, for the people in this room and the kind of platforms we have. National team is exciting, and that's the 0.01%. But this is the stuff that matters. So bring a friend to work.
Anybody else? What can these guys do, you know, almost tactically to get started on this if they don't know where to start?
I'm going to take something from the session earlier today, which is ask questions. I think asking questions and enrolling the women in your organization to have a voice would be a very tactical step in that process.
For me, it's look at them as potential, not as gender. Just find potential. That's it. And your job, for whatever role you've taken in this sport, you now have people who are looking to you to help them realize their potential. Girls, boys, doesn't matter. And so it's a huge responsibility, but embrace it. It's a great responsibility, and have them come back and tell you, you know, it was because of you that you changed my life.
I think the best day of my life will be the day that we don't talk about gender, that we don't need the Me Too movement, that we don't need to talk about girls in sport. And until we get there, well, we need to work together, and then, like, you have no idea the impact you have on everybody in your life. So make it a positive impact. Make every minute count on your work being effective, and make this game a better world. It's all our responsibility. Keep up the good work.
So mine is super easy. It involves a computer, and it involves the Keeping Girls in Sport module. So why do I recommend this? So Jumpstart Charities led this great initiative. They've built it on a beautiful platform, Respect Group platform, in partnership with Cause, so it's got our seal of approval, and in partnership with the Coaches Association of Canada, so it reflects their expertise as well. This module is designed to increase your engagement, your understanding with a girl's experience, a female's experience of the game, and what is going to set her up for greatest success. I think we have been operating for far too long with this idea that there is one game, one experience of sport. And what we know, what science tells us, what research tells us, is that in many respects, we are different in the way that we approach things. And so if we don't coach to the girls, we're missing something. We're missing their full potential. We're missing opportunities to keep them in the game and to have them be part of growing the game and making it the best that it can possibly be. So be curious, be humble, acknowledge that we don't know everything, whether you're a female coach, male coach, what have you. We all have something to learn and to better understand these young women and to put a better product in front of them.
Thank you, Alison. And correct me if I'm wrong, but proceeds do go to Cause, and they do go to Jumpstart, which are two amazing organizations that are helping us in that mission. So I think, Carmelita, you did some homework today. I think you even did most of the module before you came here today. It was, can you speak to it?
Yes, I think, okay, so I did 3/4 of it. I'm not complete. A lot going on this weekend, but
You get NCCP points for this too.
thank you.
Yes.
No, that's great. The synergies are there. No, it's essentially what I learned today. That I took a screenshot. I wish I had my phone with me, but it was about that basically for women, and this is something that just, it's like these little anecdotes shape the way we kind of view the world. And it was like a girl will seek out acceptance before they put their effort that leads to performance, as opposed to a male. And you can help me out, people have helped me out with this one. A male is more like the performance is more the acceptance and then the effort. So it's totally different in terms of how we have to approach if you're a male, if you're coaching males or females. And it's like, that was mind-blowing to me, as simple as that is. And even for females, it's like, what wasn't involved was belonging. The sense of sisterhood. And not that it's not important for males, but maybe on a lesser scale. And so how can we shape our environments at the club level, because that's where it all starts, to foster that all the way through. And if you looked at John's disconnected lineup picture, it's beautiful. It's so telling. This is the full circles right there, so we can connect all the dots however we want. But very, very powerful module.
Thank you, Carm. Before we just wrap up our closing, I will give a last opportunity for any. Yes, please.
Just 1 second. On behalf of all the refereeing community, I'm deeply sorry for the behavior of the referee in Australia. And then the next time, please give them a yellow card.
Carm, you got a job and you got a yellow card today. It was worth your time to come here. Alison, did you want to add anything else too? You're good? Like I said before, I want to do the closing and say some thank yous. I'm actually going to ask Tom here to just share a quick notification basically for you all. We're working with Cause currently to help organizations like yourselves embed gender equity into your organization. So we're calling out for pilot organizations. That's going to start soon. It's going to be due by the end of March, and we're really excited to be looking to groups like yourselves to help pilot with us this model, I guess you could say, that Cause and Ontario Soccer have been working on. So I want to make a quick announcement about that. Please email me to have some information about that, but we want to invite everybody to apply for that. And then secondly, we also have, building off of the Female Leadership Day that Brams United has done back in November, I believe, which was such a success. It brought together match officials, it brought together board members and coaches. We want to continue doing that. Ontario Soccer wants to make sure that we have these events throughout the province, and we bring together not just not just women and girls, but also the men and the boys, and to have that conversation and to continue having this type of conversation. So I draw your attention to the save the date, April 14th. We're going to be in Whitby, taking it back out to the east. So we hope we see you all there as well. And so this is the sad part, because we're going to close. And again, I want to say thank you to Wayne for your leadership, for the Respect Group and what they've done. Jumpstart, Cause, Coaching Association of Canada, they helped bring us together really today, and really do that module, everybody. It's 90 minutes of your life, and it'll make you better as a member of our soccer community. And I want to say thank you again for you. I know it's the Sunday of the summit, but having you sit in that chair is being part of the conversation, because you're actively listening. And I really do believe that by taking in what these women have said here on stage, you will be able to do your job better starting tomorrow. But most importantly, though, Thank you to the 5 of you for making your way here. Amanda's off on a flight in like an hour and a half or so, so we got to get her out of here too. But thank you for coming all the way here and being with us today, because if we can keep one more girl in sport, if we can get one more official to continue her journey of development, keep one more coach coaching, another board member in, I think we've had a success today based on what we talked about. So thank you very much. And everybody, please join me in thanking them.
Thank you.
Just one more thing. Sorry, one more thing. Before we close, one more thing. We have to thank Carm. So, everybody, just so you know, you have this passionate, intelligent, amazing woman on the staff at Ontario Soccer. She coordinated all of this. She's obviously moderating. This is your first time moderating a panel. Yes, her first time.
Thank you.
Possibly the future CEO of Ontario Soccer, right, Johnny?
I'm coming for you, Johnny.
So, Con, thank you. You've done a
Thank
fantastic job. And everybody, reach out to her. What an incredible resource you have in the Ontario Soccer office.
Thank you very much. Thank you.